now it ends. Special Counsel Jack Smith has dismissed the election interference case and classified documents cases against President-elect Donald Trump. About the January 6 case, Smith's team wrote, "After careful consideration, the department has determined that the Office of Legal Counsel's prior opinions concerning the Constitution's prohibition on federal indictment and prosecution of a sitting president apply to this situation, and as a result, this prosecution must be dismissed before the defendant is inaugurated."
Trump responded on Truth Social, writing, quote, "It was a political hijacking and a low point in the history of our country that such a thing could have happened, and yet I persevered against all odds and won Make America Great Again." The motion for the election interference case, which sought to hold Trump accountable for his efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election, was dismissed by Judge Tanya Chutkan, quote, "without prejudice." That phrase means the charges could, at least theoretically, be refiled after Trump leaves office. Smith's request for a dismissal on those terms in the Florida documents case, that's where Trump is facing charges for violating the Espionage Act and for obstruction of justice, must also be approved by a judge.
Reaction is pouring in on X. Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene posted, "Major victory for President Trump and justice. These fake and illegal charges were used to persecute President Trump for being the biggest threat to the Democrat regime. Political persecution should never happen in America." And Trump legal spokesperson Alina Habba wrote, "Will Jack Smith reimburse taxpayers for the millions wasted on this bogus witch hunt he just dropped? Asking for America." Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton weighed in. "The Jack Smith case will be remembered as a dark chapter of weaponization. They should have never been brought. Our elections are decided by voters, not by fanatical, deranged liberal lawyers like Jack Smith."
Democrats, on the other hand, are predictably unhappy. California Senator-elect Adam Schiff called Smith's dismissal a serious mistake, and New York Democratic Congressman Dan Goldman cast the decision as a shame for justice in this country. Goldman added that it establishes that Donald Trump is above the law.
I mean, I just don't see how you could not dismiss the charges, given the situation the Supreme Court left the legal matter with, clarifying that as president, and that Donald Trump would have the ability to just end it anyway. So it's not really isn't really a choice to bring it to an end at this point. The voters decided they wanted Donald Trump to be president again, and they knew very well that these things were not going to continue if Donald Trump won re-election. And so I think it is, the will of the people ultimately.
So I think it is not surprising that Jack Smith has done what Jack Smith did. I think, though, that focusing only on that loses the bigger picture, which is that Donald Trump has got away with this stuff. And that's where I think there's a major problem for many, many, many people. And look, I know this gets sucked into the debate about politicization and all of that. All I would say to people is read the indictments. Like, read the indictments about January the 6th. Read the indictments about Mar-a-Lago. The Mar-a-Lago case, if the behavior is as alleged in the indictment, is absolutely textbook obstruction of justice. A lawful subpoena had been issued, all sorts of chicanery behind the scenes where boxes are being removed from one place and a fewer number of boxes are being returned. There are attempts to remove or delete surveillance camera footage and all the rest of it. On January the 6th, Smith did make the point, which might appeal to a free speech advocate like yourself, Robby, that it was not about Trump making the argument that the election had been fraudulent or whatever, even if he knew that claim was false. It was about the taking of action to intimidate state officials, to seek to have the Department of Justice launch sham investigations into specious allegations of election fraud, and so on and so forth. While Trump all the while had been told by his own vice president, by his own campaign team, by advisors around him, that the election was not fraudulent. He's got away with this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a significant area of disagreement because I also read the indictment, and I think that Trump's conduct relating to the election matters was appalling. His involvement in what happened in January 6 is disqualifying, and that impeachment was the correct remedy for what occurred. However, he was acquitted. It was the Senate's job to vote to remove him from office. Yep. They declined. And to me, that's like, well, that was the appropriate thing to handle. And then they came up with this criminal idea. I have read the indictment. Look, I think, for instance, the Georgia case is making a better argument of tying it to specific actions taken by underlings of his, and it being because of the way the Georgia statute is structured to be a kind of group criminal conspiracy, he's going to, and also he can't dismiss those state charges. So that is going to be a stronger case. Now they've screwed it up by having a prosecutor who hired her boyfriend to do it and all that fun stuff. But the problem for me with the Jack Smith, and you say it's about actions, but I read the indictment, and there are several places where it says, at this time he wrote on X. At this time he did. There's attempt to use tracking data to find out, was he on his phone during the course? How soon did he know that there was a riot going on? That kind of thing that does to me was going to be an interesting philosophical debate over when words cross the line into actions. Obviously, if you plan to rob a bank and you tell people about it, well, that's still part of criminal activity. It's not we don't say, oh, it's speech, so it's protected. That said, I would give him a lot of leeway to say things and ask for things and make assertions that, while wrong, are still part of his own free speech. You say intimidating state officials. Again, they could make that case, and maybe they would have convinced a jury that it was intimidation. But even something, again, I'm not defending it or saying that it's correct, but from a legal matter, to criminalize, to prosecute and potentially jail someone for saying, like, I think I won 10,000 more votes. Can't you find the 10,000 more votes that I won by? Is that intimidation, or is that his wrong-headed opinion?
I theoretically...
If you don't like it, you didn't have to vote for him, or they could have removed him from office. They didn't do either of those things.
But he was president of the United States at the time. It's not me calling up the Georgia Secretary of State and saying, hey, could you find Trump 11th? It's the sitting president of the United States. There is inherently such power wielded by the occupant of that office that it is, on its face, intimidatory, in my view.
Well, I mean, if you take that view, isn't everything the president says a kind of intimidation? Or when Joe Biden, and I've criticized him for this, I don't think he should be prosecuted criminally for it. When Joe Biden says, Facebook is killing people because it didn't take down enough misinformation, is that pressuring the company to do more? I mean, I would argue that it is. I don't know that it's criminal. I mean, everything the president does is an expression of potential legislation or executive action or something.
Yeah.
Again, I think what Trump said was wrong and bad, and he shouldn't have done it. And there was the mechanism to hold him accountable for it was impeachment, and that just didn't work. And then the other mechanism was not voting to reelect him. The American people did so. I really worry about, I would give a lot of latitude to people, even political officials, to say things that are wrong.
So I think, we basically disagree on a president asking for things in that respect. And I think that there are plainly actions involved in what Trump did in and around January the 6th and in the lead up to it, having lost the election and then seeking to overturn that election result. I would also say that one of the reasons I am often as focused or more focused on the Mar-a-Lago case is that even though it is not of quite the monumental historic importance of January the 6th, the actions there are very clear.
Case, there's no
defense, right? The
defense is it's trivial, is the defense.
Or the defense is he didn't do what the indictment says he did. But if he did do those things, it is not just whether it is trivial or not to have the information in boxes. It is the obvious attempt, if the conduct set forth in the indictment is true, to obstruct justice by avoiding a lawful subpoena.
Yeah, I mean, that one just doesn't seems, I say it's trivial because it's not trivial actually, but boxes of documents were retained by Joe Biden and Mike Pence and probably every other political figure accidentally.
Yes, but Joe Biden wasn't subpoenaed to produce them.
They gave them back
right.
and asked, and Donald Trump didn't, and so this whole thing happened. And he could have very easily given them back, but he took the view that he didn't have to give them back, that he had declassified them, and he was entitled to keep them, and that was important because the generals were going to try to say that he was advocating for war with North Korea, and he wanted to keep those documents so that said that no, here's where actually they were doing that, or they had a plan to attack North Korea. That wasn't on me, which actually does sound like a potentially politically of worth a point to be able to make. And also, I take so much umbrage at the knee-jerk classification of every single thing as classified or secret or being withheld. That said, he should have just given it back like the other political figures, but I'm not gonna. I don't wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat that oh my God, that box of documents was in the Mar-a-Lago bathroom. Oh no, not that.
But the point isn't really the classification, Robby. I will stretch here to try to be fair to Trump. The question in Trump's several cases to me is, would an individual citizen be prosecuted for the same conduct? And I think that Trump could offer a defense on things like the New York case in that respect. But if you or I were subpoenaed to produce documents, whether we thought the underlying reason for producing those was right or not, and we conspired with people to hide those documents, we would be going to jail.
I hear you, and I respect that view. My only problem with that is there's so much the over-criminalization of society. There's the law is extraordinarily complex as it relates to expectations for people in political office, campaign finance, the Hatch Act, what you're allowed to do in official capacity. There's so much there, and then there's so much in a non-political context. I've heard this argument, and people who work in criminal justice will say this, that if they really, really, really want to, we all violate a law every day inadvertently without knowing it. If they really want to get you on something, they always can. And so it's not. It's more so that the leeway shown to Donald Trump, I would probably should be shown to more people without political power and influence. Like, I don't want to lock up everybody for not dotting their I's and crossing their T's, right? I'm sure you don't either.
I don't, but I do want to lock up people who try to violently overturn an election, so that's another element of the whole thing. But anyway.
All right, well, that's our debate on that subject for today. Tell us what you think in the comments, and we'll be back with a lot more Rising right after this.